for bearing with us during some technical difficulties. We're back with our career lunch. We're here with Emmy Favilla, who's a copy chief at Buzzfeed. So Vicky, I know you have some questions for Emmy, so let's just jump right in.
Sounds great. Emmy, can you walk us through a typical day at Buzzfeed in the newsroom?
Sure. So for me as a copy chief, we have a copy department of 3, and we sort of just split up stories amongst us. Our hours are staggered. So the copy department is me, my associate copy editor, who comes in from about 8 to 4. She grabs a lot of the breaking news stories, anything that's come in overnight from our UK office, and then I usually come in around 11 or 12, and then sort of start working from there. And then we have a third copy editor based in our LA office who does the later shift. And basically, we just kind of, comb through the website. We prioritize stories that are on the homepage. On the right-hand side of the homepage, you'll see there's a column that says big stories, and those are the stories that are, world news, politics, long-form stories, essays that are just denser. So we obviously prioritize stories that have more words. And we also use Google Analytics to see which stories are getting the most traffic throughout the day. So we'll check Google Analytics periodically, and that'll show us the top 20 performing stories. And we'll kind of make sure that those have been seen as well. Just because, even if it's a story that doesn't necessarily have that many words, if 1 million people are reading this one story and there's an egregious error in the headline, that's a big deal. So that's kind of how we prioritize the stories. We try to get to as much as we can throughout the day. We can't get to every single story just because of the sheer amount of posts going up per day, but that's kind of how we prioritize stories here.
Interesting. So I was just going to say the amount of volume that goes on BuzzFeed, your eyes must be tired at the end of the day.
Yes. Yes.
How many pieces, Emmy, would you say on an average day do you copy edit?
It's hard because every day is a little different in terms of how many things we're reading. On Thursdays, for instance, we publish a long-form story, which is anywhere between, say, 5,000 and 12,000 words. So if we're reading that, that could take up a good, chunk of our day. But I want to say on average, we're reading between like 3 and 4 pieces an hour, probably. Sometimes, more than that if it's just kind of quick posts. Sometimes less if we're reading longer pieces. Maybe we're reading only 4 stories in a day, one day, and then 30 the next day. So it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. I was just going to say at the end of a week, that's if you're doing, let's say, 3 to 4 an hour and you're doing an 8-hour day, you're editing over 100 pieces every single week. You must be, there's a lot of content there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but it's fun. It's fun because we publish such a variety of stuff that it never feels, monotonous and boring. It's always, it's always something new. So.
Right. Exactly. And I want to just backtrack a little bit, Emmy. When you were hired by Buzzfeed, how did you do your job search with them, and how did you get your foot initially in the door there?
Well, I had actually worked with 2 other editors at Teen Vogue who both recommended this position. They kind of let me know that there was a position opening at Buzzfeed, and when I heard about that, I was like, oh my God, this would be a perfect fit for me. It was nice that I kind of had their recommendations, and then I went ahead and I applied for the job. I checked their job listings, so I kind of had a tip off that they were hiring, and I applied formally and scheduled an interview with the executive editor and HR, and we kind of and then it just kind of, proceeded as usual. And, we interviewed, I had a copy test, and things worked out well.
Excellent. So you applied, and then they reached out to you, or were your editors at Teen Vogue, did they have an in, and then they kind of forwarded your resume as well?
No, actually, BuzzFeed reached out to me. The executive editor reached out to me. So, yeah, they had kind of, told me that there was this position open. I seeked it out, and, yeah, and then, the executive editor got in touch with me, and then I came in, I met with her, and met with the editor-in-chief. They sent me a copy test, which I took and sent back, and yeah, and then I started here in October 2012.
Wow, it sounds so straightforward. For our viewers watching, what should they know about the interviewing process? Was there anything unique that they should think about if they want to pursue a job at Buzzfeed, or was it pretty much standard, copy edit test, interviews, done?
I mean, the thing is with copy editing jobs specifically, you're always going to take a copy test because they want to make sure that you know what you're doing, you know your punctuation and your grammar and how to edit things, for clarity and all of that. But the interview itself, I want to say it was one of the more kind of casual interviews that I've had. I mean, I just felt really comfortable, and it at times just felt more of like a casual conversation, like, well, what TV shows do you watch? What kind of music are you into? I felt like it was more of a conversation about my interests as far as what I like to read on the web, just normal pop culture sort of interest. And I think that's really important too, both for the interviewer and the interviewee to kind of get a sense of the person and make them feel comfortable and not feel like you have to sort of prove yourself or fit into this mold, especially with the web, because I don't know, it's just there's so many, I feel like, more niche places for you to find your perfect fit, that it's important to kind of just have a normal conversation and kind of get to know a person outside of just their work history, and kind of get to know what they like personally and what they're into and stuff like that. So it was nice because it was kind of casual and really comfortable.
Nice. Would you say the culture there is also very similar in terms of casual and comfortable?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, we have a ping pong table. People just kind of take a break sometimes. And it's just everyone really loves their work here and loves what they do. And I think that is such a huge part of why BuzzFeed has been so successful, because everyone is just really supportive and really excited about what they're doing and like really eager to kind of bounce ideas off of other people. And yeah, and it's just, I feel like it's casual because it can be, because we all get our work done well and we do what we love. And yeah, I mean, it's a very, it's kind of like, I'm the copy chief, for instance, but if I want to go to a music brainstorm meeting, and kind of talk about my ideas that I have for the music vertical, I'm more than welcome to join in that. So it's kind of like a very collaborative environment. There aren't a lot of, hard and fast, like, well, if you're in this department, you can only, do this. And, so I mean, I've created posts, I've worked with other editors on posts, not just me editing them, but, actually, creating content, things like that. So yeah, it's like a really casual, collaborative environment, and people get things done. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Excellent. No, it sounds great. And then when you joined in 2012, did you have to change your approach at all to copy editing because the pieces on BuzzFeed are so unique versus longer feature pieces, or no, because it's standard copy editing 101 is copy editing?
That's a really good question, because I did have to change my approach a little bit, because the tone varies so widely across the site in terms of pieces that we're writing. If I'm editing a list of like something super silly versus editing a story about, something going on in Syria, you're obviously, you kind of have to, if you're editing a story about, world news or politics, there are hard and fast rules. There's a way to edit that. But then if I'm editing this like funny list about like Anne Hathaway's worst hairstyles, it's like sometimes it just looks funnier if the sentence is all in capital letters with no punctuation. So things like that, like you kind of have to be sensitive to the tone of a piece. If something's a little sillier and it's not like, a journalistic sort of reported piece and it's funny, there are ways, you don't always have to be like a strict, grammar snob about things when you're editing pieces that are sillier. So yeah, so you kind of do have to be mindful of, the content of what you're editing and take it from there.
No, that's interesting, because that's almost, I think, a skill in itself, is to know when to be silly and when not to be silly. So, which leads me to my next question for viewers watching: what type of skills should they covet or hone in order to succeed at a place like BuzzFeed, in addition to copy editing?
Well, I think that you just need to be able to, one of the most important things, and I mean this extends beyond just BuzzFeed as well, is just as a copy editor to be able to defend your decisions. You don't necessarily need to, have your house style guide or AP style guide memorized from, top to bottom, but just having a good grasp of sort of the rules and knowing why you're making an edit, and being able to explain that to a writer or editor makes them trust you and makes them, more accepting of, okay, yeah, like we should make that change because of A, B, and C reason. And especially at BuzzFeed, it's kind of like, you also have to, and a big part of why the style guide that we made, that we made live in February, a part of why that made such a big buzz is because it includes sort of like funny web speaky sort of terms And you kind of have to make a little bit more, some more executive decisions about things that aren't in AP style guide, like, for instance, vining, to make a vine. If you're using the verb form of that, is it vining, V-I-N-I-N-G? Is it V-I-N-E-ing? Things like that. You know, you kind of just have to be a little bit more open to everyone else's suggestions, because there aren't a lot of rules for some of these phrases, and and rules about, like, hashtags. Do we capitalize all the first letter of a new word in a hashtag? Things like that. And a fun thing that I like to do is I like to go on Twitter and sort of ask people what they think is the right choice to make. So yeah, so it's a lot more. It's important to be able to collaborate and be sort of receptive to other people's ideas, especially at BuzzFeed, because we're dealing with a lot of content that there aren't hard and fast rules for yet. So it's important to be kind of open to everyone's input and thoughts, and based on their particular areas of expertise and things like that.
It's interesting because with social media, the rules are changing, and then the question is, like you say, like what is right versus what is wrong, what looks right, and it's constantly evolving.
Right.
In terms of people who are watching, if they're already editors, what do you think one or two most important things that they should have in order to demonstrate to an employer why they could do the job well, aside from the actual edit test during an interview?
Just sort of being able to, well, I mean, if you're a copy editor, and I think one important thing to point out is if you're a copy editor and you're only in print, start editing for the web, because that's super important. Know your way around a CMS and sort of, web-specific things. If you're in print and you have a web department, kind of talk to them and see if you can help edit their sort of stuff. And also just, as a copy editor, I think it's just really important to have a handle on it's kind of like as many topics as you can, just reading and knowing, not to say that you have to be an expert on every topic under the sun, but, especially working at a place like BuzzFeed and at an increasing number of web publications, you're editing so many different kinds of stories that it helps to be familiar with the content that you're editing as much as possible. I never knew much about sports or politics, and before coming to BuzzFeed, and I feel like I've learned a lot more, and I kind of try to read more stories in subject areas that I'm not that familiar with. This way, when I come to a story about a football coach, I'm not asking stupid questions. Not that any questions are ever stupid, but I'm not asking questions about, like, oh, well, is this position one word or two? So I think it's just, as a copy editor especially, it's important to kind of have a well-rounded grasp on kind of every subject that you possibly can, especially when you're working for a website like BuzzFeed, where you're reading so many different types of stories. It just makes things easier, and yeah.
And I think that makes perfect sense, because when you think of media in general, like, we shouldn't just be siloed to our one role and wear that hat and only have tunnel vision. It's like you really need to know what's going on in the world around you. So I think that's such a good point that you're making in terms of not only maybe editing, but writing and video and all the other aspects. Yeah. My only last question for you, Emmy, is there anything else we didn't cover that you want viewers to know in terms of editing or work and life at BuzzFeed?
Not so much. I'm trying to think if we didn't get to anything. Not really. I mean, I just think that for me personally, it's been really great working at BuzzFeed, because I was the first copy editor they've ever had. So to be able to kind of shape that role and figure out, what I should be doing to make things easier for everyone on the staff, and kind of help everyone adhere to house style and figure out how to make posts as clear and succinct as possible has been really cool and really fun. So yeah, I think, unless you have any other questions, I feel like we covered a good deal.
Yeah, we did. Thank you for all of your insight.
And thank you, Vicki Salemi. I didn't introduce you to begin with, so sorry about that. She's our Media Jobs Daily blogger, editor, and she's also our expert on jobs. And also, I wanted to mention that Emmy is also a Mediabistro instructor who has taught some courses in our copy editing certificate program. And so definitely it's one of our on-demand courses if you wanted to take that. We also, we have that available. And then hopefully Emmy in the future will be teaching one of those classes. But thank you once again, and I apologize for the technical difficulties that we endured. Our next career hangout will be June 4th, and we'll be speaking with Susan Burns, who's health and fitness writer-editor. So hopefully you'll tune in then at 1 o'clock on Wednesday, June 4th. Thank you.
Thanks.